Welcome back to another episode of Wagmi TV. As always, if you like this content, feel free to like, comment, subscribe below, and let's get into it.
Just to kind of start, I think the biggest news as of late that everyone's very familiar with at this point, and we've talked about it a lot on this channel, is just the merge, right? Super impressive, went on without a hitch, no validator attacks, no downtime, just a hard fork, right? No specific impact on scalability right out of the gate. It was really just a change to the consensus mechanism, but it was really a testament to the Ethereum team and how closely they want to monitor a lot of these things and make sure that these obviously go off without a hitch and they have no problems. So I think that goes a lot with, some of the updates that are coming down the pipeline that we've been talking about. I think one of the biggest pieces of the merge itself and really the move over to proof of stake was that originally ETH was kind of looked at as sufficiently decentralized. I think one of the things that we saw pretty quickly after the merge actually happened was news articles like this, right? It really called into question that move to proof of stake, how centralized this was from a validator perspective. And that's been the case with a lot of these proof of stake chains. So it's not necessarily anything new that we've been seeing, but it's new obviously for Ethereum and those that hold Ethereum. So I think some of the numbers were that it was over 50% was controlled by some 5 or so entities, but do you have some specific numbers around that, Ev?
Yeah, I think it was closer to 35%, but really what we saw in that article was about 50% of the nodes that were on cloud providers were on Amazon. So, that's an extremely centralized piece of the network there. I think another part that this tells us about proof of stake chains is that these nodes or validators are really difficult to run, from a technical perspective. It's not something where you can just have these super souped up computers at home that are going to compete in a proof of work chain. So it's really this change from being able to just run these very energy intensive nodes to now switching over to these validators that have to have high availability, high throughput, stuff like that. That will kind of create centralization in some of these networks that we're seeing, especially Ethereum here.
Yeah, I think the main concern about that for a lot of people is that essentially the blockchain at that point isn't really censorship resistant, right? It makes it difficult for a lot of people, a lot of groups to trust from that perspective. I think a really good example of this was Tornado Cash, right? Super easy for a small number of validators to really start to control a network. And so I think that's what people are trying to call their attention to when something like this happens. We don't really know if it's something that we need to keep too close of an eye on at this point, but it was something that was brought up pretty heavily from the merge and due to the merge.
Yeah, and I guess a question for you, Armada. When you look at regulators in the U.S., how do they perceive proof of stake chains? Is there a difference in their mindset from a proof of stake chain compared to a proof of work chain?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really kind of the main thing when it comes to a lot of these news points that people should be very, very aware of. Like I mentioned, when Ethereum was a proof of work chain, it really was looked at as sufficiently decentralized. People like Gary Gensler, the SEC, were kind of like looking at that more of like a Bitcoin, really looking at it as a commodity rather than a security. So at this point, with the move to proof of stake, there are some concerns about whether the SEC would view this proof of stake ETH as a security, right? We know that Gary Gensler himself has said that the staking model checks one of the couple of boxes of the Howey test, which is essentially what the SEC uses to determine whether an asset is a security or not. And so obviously that's some news that we're going to want to really keep an eye on. It's not just Ethereum. Again, it's all proof of stake chains and a lot of, honestly, the crypto out there from the L1 perspective. And so a security designation for Ethereum would definitely have a massive impact on the Ethereum system. It'd have a massive impact on the price action of Ethereum. So definitely something to keep an eye on. I think Ethereum's big enough at this point where even if that were to happen, they could register themselves as a security. I think some of these other chains that are a little bit smaller, maybe a little bit less robust, don't have the buy-in or network behind them. they might have a little bit more issues when it comes to being listed as a security if some of that regulation does come down the pipeline. But no, super good question. I think that's kind of top of mind for everybody at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're going to see more on that front with the XRP case that's ongoing and should have more news around this summer. But talking about stuff that's coming down the pipeline, what's next for Ethereum here in 2023?
Yeah, so I think that's kind of what everyone's been looking at, right? What's next? What are some of these upgrades? What do they look like? So we were looking through some of the Ethereum news the last couple of weeks. The big thing is what they're calling this Shapella Upgrade, right? It's the Shanghai and Capella Upgrade put together, a little word combo or wombo like all of us like to use all the time on the Wagmi team. But this had a lot of good information. I think one of the big things that we'll talk about a lot is withdrawals that are coming from this. But they have an entire FAQ that I can pull up here as well, which we'll link in this video in the description. But really what this is essentially the names of the upcoming Ethereum hard forks. So Shanghai is essentially a fork on the execution layer. The Capella is actually an upgrade on the consensus layer. So a little bit different, but kind of put together in that fashion. So what the merge did not allow validators to do was withdraw staked ETH or any of those rewards that they had been given, right? So a major new feature of this Shanghai piece or the Shapella upgrade as a whole is actually the withdrawal of validators from the Ethereum beacon chain, right? So the reason why this is so important is because it really could make or break the network, as well as obviously price action, which a lot of our viewers definitely care about. So Shanghai itself, it's tentatively supposed to take place in March. There has been a little bit of debate over that. I know some of the core devs there were complaining that this could be moving too quickly. I think it wouldn't be. It's very common for Ethereum to take its time.
Ethereum-like.
on things like this. But like I said, kind of at the beginning of the episode, it's something that you can really look at the Ethereum team to be like, they're going to get this right. And if they say that we need to, pause this or calm ourselves on this, maybe it's something that we should listen to. But at this time, it appears that timeline's still in mind. It should be around March where this could start to happen. And that Shanghai testnet is actually scheduled for sometime in February. So I think it's super important to kind of dive into what this actually looks like, right? So at this time, individuals have to have 32 Ether locked up in order to run a validator, right? They participate in the Ethereum beacon chain, which then handles the consensus of the network. Essentially, the withdrawal fork will give the ability to stop running their validator, exit the network, and unlock their 32 Ether and really any earned rewards. But it's not quite that simple. When I was diving into this FAQ that they built out, it was super robust and really well put. But there are really two types, right? There's essentially a partial withdrawal and a full withdrawal. So the partial withdrawal is balances in excess of 32 Ethereum, including their earned rewards, can then be withdrawn and they can be spent immediately. Right, the validator continues as part of the beacon chain with the 32 ETH locked up, and essentially any other rewards that they have or anything in excess of those 32 ETH can be taken out of the system. So these are things that'll be able to happen automatically if you have the correct credentials that are all put into the system, and it will be done in what they call a round robin fashion. So an average of one sweep per week. And they designed it this way, very in a smart fashion. I think this was something that we talked about a lot. If that sort of volume were to hit Ethereum in March and all of these were to be able to be unlocked, that could have some pretty serious impacts, not just to the price, but obviously to the network itself. So they designed it so as to not place too much burden on the network as a whole. And I think that's a very good option where instead of just being like, okay, it's a free-for-all, let's have people be able to pull out essentially the rewards that they've gained, any excess ETH that they have, but we can keep them on as a validator for the time being. The other type, so that was the partial type. The other type is a full withdrawal. So the validator will essentially exit and stop being a part of the beacon chain entirely. So the entire 32 ETH principal and any rewards is essentially unlocked for them, and it'll be allowed to be spent after exit withdrawal mechanism is essentially complete. There is a rate limited by that protocol to ensure not too much of a change in the validator. There isn't too much of a change in the validator set. And that rate limit really depends on the number of validators in the system.
Yeah, and I think it's something where, well, thanks for going over that. That was great detail there. And I think, you outlined some of the negative price action that we could see if it was the case where they allowed everybody to, withdraw, or even in the case that, people are withdrawing that have had their ETH staked on there for a while. What this also opens up is more customer or investor confidence. We look at Coinbase and they already do about $50 million a year in staking. And it's something where JP Morgan, I think other analysts have said, this part of their business could really increase, because what it does allow the user to do is deposit their funds and within a known timeline be able to withdraw them. I think a big knock that we had seen on the Beacon chain or ETH proof of stake in the past was that there wasn't a definite timeline on when you were going to be able to withdraw your ETH that you had staked on the Beacon chain. And so this is really that announcement that you're able to get your funds back. And so I think, there obviously is negative price action that could happen when people are able to unlock their ETH, but it's something where it could also bring confidence to, the Ethereum ecosystem here.
Absolutely. I think that's a fantastic point. And those who have a long-term mindset, it's not something that I don't think they have to worry too much about. We really look at ETH, of course, other than Bitcoin, as one of essentially the blue chips of cryptocurrency, right? I think one of the things we talk about, and I'll pull this up really quickly, is how ETH is deflationary, right? They call it ultrasound money. That is something that was able to occur due to this proof of stake merge, right? It's really, really interesting to see the more that this is utilized, the more deflationary that it becomes day after day, week after week, right? And just like you said, in the long term, this is going to be something that's going to be super useful for them. And it's going to be something that isn't going to be a knock against them, that people don't know exactly when they can withdraw some of their funds. They don't have any clarity on that. I think in the short term, yeah, there could be some sell pressure, maybe in March or whenever this Shanghai update actually does happen. Right. You have a lot of people who had deposited in probably March of 2020 when all of this started.
2 years.
Right? So, they are sitting on that. ETH was trading at $500, $600, $700 at that point. So early stakers, they might be looking to take some profits. There might be a little bit of forced selling, if you will, with things happening with FTX and all the BS that's happened over the last year. I think that just goes into effect with, they're trying to do this in a very smart way, right? Not everyone's going to be able to withdraw immediately. They're going to have rate limits on the full validator exits. They're going to have the partial exits. So they're going to keep some of those validators from that perspective. And people who have been in there have probably a fair amount of rewards at this point, if they're looking at 6, 7, 8, maybe even 10% back on their Ethereum that they've been staking. So super good points. I think it's super bullish in general for Ethereum. And again, looking at them as a blue chip, it's awesome to see them go to work and how well they've been kind of handling really this bear market as a whole.
Yeah. And I think it's something where, when the merge was happening, it wasn't really something that changed the user experience or really how a Ethereum holder would look at it. Like, it didn't really change much in our lives. With this one, you're able to actually, withdraw some of your ETH or get a date for when you could. And it really does affect the user, the customer, the investor in this upgrade. So I think that's kind of the difference that we see is with the merge, it was awesome and the hype around it was really cool, but you didn't really see a big change in your day-to-day life. But with this, it actually does allow you to withdraw, and it kind of, changes your perspective on Ethereum. So yeah, definitely big news and looking forward to it.
Yeah, Ethereum's definitely king of one foot in front of the other, right? They're not trying to rush anything. They're just going to make sure that they do it right. And because they're a first mover and because it's a bear market, I think they can take their time with a lot of these things. So, I think here's to hopefully them getting it right, whether or not they need to push that past March. I'm personally fine with that, but I know a lot of people probably do want to pull out, take some profits, things like that. So, wish them the best, but that's kind of the biggest thing that's on the Ethereum docket.
Yeah, thanks for covering that. And I think very exciting news for ETH and the ETH community. As always, if the listeners, if you guys like this content, feel free to like, comment, subscribe below. We'd love to hear your thoughts on everything ETH and what's coming down the pipeline for ETH in 2023. Yeah, thanks again for watching and Wagmi.
Wagmi.